We are going to look at adding and subtracting rational expressions. Let's start with a review. Simplify the following expression. So first step is we're going to factor. So if we take a look at the first numerator, we have x squared minus 4, and you should hopefully notice that that is difference of squares, and that would factor to x plus 2, x minus 2. The denominator is already factored, x plus 10, just x and a number. And then we have a division problem, which we talked yesterday. We can change to multiplication and then flip the second fraction. And when we do that, if we have 2 times x plus 20, we can factor out the 2. We're left with x plus 10. And then the top part, which becomes the new denominator, we're going to think what multiplies to negative 6, that adds to 1. And so that would be x plus 3, x minus 2. So there's the first factor. Also, the second step, we flipped the second one because it was division. Now we can multiply. Now you look for 1's to cancel. So the x plus 10's would cancel the x minus 2's. And that's about it. So then in the numerator, we have our x plus 2 times 2. And in the denominator, we have x plus 3. So the steps are multiply and divide. You're going to factor. You're going to cancel the 1's and rewrite. If it's division, you'll flip the second fraction. Today we're going to look at adding and subtracting rational expressions. So we'll start with an easier example. Half plus half is 1 whole. Another way to do that is, since they have a common denominator, we're going to add the numerators. So we have 1 plus 1 is 2. We leave the common denominator, we get 2 over 2, which would give us 1. Let's do an example that doesn't have a common denominator. We would look at 1 and 2, or 1 half and 1 fourth. What's 1 half plus 1 fourth? And look for a common denominator. 2 and 4 can both go into 4. So our lowest common denominator here is 4. We need to get that on the bottom of both fractions. So to do that, we look at the first term, 1 half, and we want to get a 4 on the bottom. So to do that, we're going to multiply by 2 over 2. The 2 on the bottom will give us the 4, and then we have to put the 2 on the top so that we're really multiplying by a 1. So we're changing the way it looks, but not its actual value. So we get 2 over 4 plus 1 over 4. Once you have a common denominator, you ignore the bottom. It's just 4. But then you can add the top. 2 plus 1 is 3. And we get 3 over 4. So in order to add or subtract fractions, you do need a common denominator. And today we'll practice finding the least common denominator. Alright, so we need a common denominator, but we're going to look for the smallest one. So we call that the least common denominator or lowest common denominator, so LCD. So let's practice finding the lowest common denominator. So we'll take a look at 3 and 15. What is the smallest number that 3 and 15 can both go into? And that would be 15. How about 3 and x? What's the smallest number that 3 and x can both go into? That would be 3x. How about 2x and 8x? What's the smallest number that 2x and 8x can go into? That would be 8x. So in class, what people notice, hey, is it just always the biggest number? It sometimes is, but sometimes isn't. So we'll take a look at this example. 1/5 plus 1/7. You look at 5 and 7. What's the smallest number that 5 and 7 both go into? Here it's 35. So it's not always just the biggest number. To find the lowest common denominator, you can list all the factors of the numerator. Okay, so basically what we talk about in class is, again, you look at the 2 on the bottom. What is the smallest number that they both can turn into or go into? So in this case, it's 15. X squared. In this case, it would be 3x squared. And then we'll do an example like this in a little bit. Okay, so let's get to how do you actually add or subtract these rational expressions. So here are the steps that I wrote out. First step is you're going to factor. So if we look at the first example, it's already factored. Second step is we're going to list the lowest common denominator, which is everything on the bottom of your fraction, unless something repeats. If it repeats, you just write it once. So on the bottom, I see an x minus 3 and a 3x plus 4. This is actually part of our answer. This is the bottom of our answer, the lowest common denominator. So our goal is to get this on the bottom of both fractions. Now if you take a look at the first fraction right here, what factor is missing? We have the x minus 3. We need the x minus, or 3x plus 4. So the LCD tells us what to multiply by to complete it. So again, we have the x minus 3. We need the 3x plus 4. So that is what we multiply by on top and bottom. So we don't change the value, we just change the way it looks. Take a look at the second fraction. It has a 3x plus 4. We need it to be matching the lowest common denominator, so we're going to multiply it by x minus 3. So multiply this one by x minus 3 over x minus 3. Again, we multiply by the same thing on the top and bottom, so we are changing the way it looks but not its value because we're essentially multiplying by 1. Okay, now we're done with the bottom. We have the LCD on the bottom of both fractions, so now we're just going to deal with the top, and we're going to distribute and combine like terms. So the first thing we're going to distribute is the x. So we have 3x times x is 3x squared. We have 4 times x is 4x. Then we have plus, and then we do the other part. We're going to distribute the 2. 2 times x is 2x. 2 times negative 3 is negative 6. So again, once you have the LCD on the bottom, you just look at the top, you distribute. Now we're going to combine like terms and put it in standard form. So we have 3x squared, the highest exponent comes first. We're going to combine our x's, and then we have our minus 6 at the end. So there's the numerator, and the denominator is the LCD, which we got in step 2. So we're just going to stick that all over x minus 3, 3x plus 4. And then we're done. So our steps are find the LCD, make our denominators match the LCD, simplify the top, and then rewrite. Okay, let's try another one. First step factor, there's only one thing we can factor here, and it's the x squared minus 1, which factors to x plus 1, x minus 1. There's difference of squares. Next step, write the LCD. The LCD is everything on the bottom of the fraction. Unless it repeats, you only write it once. So we have an x plus 1, and x minus 2. I see an x plus 1 again, but we don't need to write it again. We'll just write the x minus 1. Okay, our goal is to get the LCD on the bottom of both fractions. So take a look at the first fraction, and you have to think, all right, what is missing from the LCD? We have an x plus 1 and x minus 2, but we need the x minus 1. So that is what we're going to multiply by, the missing factor. So x minus 1, x minus 1. All right, take a look at the second fraction. We have x plus 1, x minus 1. We're missing the x minus 2. So that's what we're going to multiply by, x minus 2 over x minus 2. All right, we're done with the bottom because it matches the LCD, so just deal with the top. So we're going to distribute. The first thing we'll distribute is the 3x. 3x times x is 3x squared. 3x times negative 1 is negative 3x. Then we have our plus, and now we're going to distribute the 4. 4 times x is 4x. 4 times negative 2 is negative 8. So there's the top. Now we're going to combine like terms and put it in standard form. We have 3x squared plus x minus 8, and that goes all over our LCD, which we got in step 2. So all over x minus 1, x minus 2, or x plus 1, x minus 2, order doesn't matter really, and the x minus 1. And there's our answer. All right, let's do one more adding, and we'll take a look at subtracting. So here we want the LCD of 2x squared and 5x. What number do they both go into? And in this case, it's 10x squared. So this is what we want on the bottom of both fractions. So we'll take a look at the first fraction. How can you make a 2x squared into a 10x squared? Well, we can multiply that by 5. How about the second term? We have the 5x. How can you turn that into a 10x squared? Well, we can multiply that by 2x. All right, we're done with the bottom. Just look at the top and multiply. 5 times 3 is 15. 2 times 2x is 4x. And that's all over 10x squared. Can write it in standard form by putting the highest power of x first. So we can rewrite this as 4x plus 15 over 10x squared. All right, let's take a look at subtraction, which is essentially the same thing, except you're going to distribute a negative. So we'll talk about that. All right, so number 12, let's factor. The only thing we can factor is the x squared plus the 2x. We could pull an x out of that. When we do that, we divide each by an x. So we have an x plus a 2 left over. All right, let's write the LCD. It's everything on the bottom. Unless something repeats, we only write it once. So here our LCD is x plus 2, and x plus 3. So this is what we want on the bottom of both fractions. So if you look at the first fraction, we're missing the x plus 3. So that's what we'll multiply by. If we look at the second term, we're missing the x. So that's what we'll multiply by. All right, we're done with the bottom, so now we deal with just the top. So the first one, we have a binomial times a binomial. When you have that, you have to FOIL or use a rectangle to multiply that out. So you have x plus 3, and we get x squared, 3x, 3x, and 9. So if we write that out, we get x squared plus 6x plus 9. All right, now with subtraction, this is a negative x, and that is what you have to distribute. So that's the only difference with a subtraction problem is you do distribute a negative. So negative x times x is negative x squared. All right, let's combine like terms. The x squareds cancel, so we have 6x plus 9, and we put that all over the LCD, which is x, x plus 2, x plus 3, and then we're done. Okay, let's try one more. We have 10 over 3x minus 8 over 5x. We need an LCD. In this case, it's 15x. So we need that on the bottom of both fractions. So how do we turn a 3x into a 15x? We multiply by 5. How do we turn a 5x into a 15x? We multiply by 3. We're done with the bottom because both are now 15x. So now look at the top, distribute. 5 times 10 is 50. 8 times 3 is 24. Combine like terms, that's 26. We put it all over the LCD. So subtraction is the same thing, you just have to remember to distribute the negative. All right, tomorrow in class we will review more of all four operations: add, subtract, multiply, and divide.